Thank you very much, Raquel. Again, I'm Jennifer Wieland with Nelson Nygaard. I have the pleasure of supporting Boulder County and all of you as we think about a shared vision for transit for the county. In our time together this evening, we're going to go over a few quick housekeeping instructions. We will have a welcome and some introductions, move into a quick overview of the project, and then talk a little bit about the needs and opportunities for transit in the county. And we will have time at the end for some Q&A as well. A couple of housekeeping items. We are, of course, on Zoom. Thank you all for joining us. Please keep your microphones muted so that we can minimize background noise. We also encourage you to keep video off during the presentation to preserve bandwidth for people. And then we do invite you to use the chat to either let us know if you need technical support or to ask questions as we go. And so what we have on the screen here are just some arrows that point you to the little microphone for muting yourself, to the video camera so that you can turn your camera off, and then to the little speech bubbles that show you how to make the chat pop up. As we go through today's presentation, we are recording so that other people will be able to watch the presentation and gain some information afterwards. We are going to use a service called Mentimeter, which is live polling to get feedback from you throughout the meeting. And then again, please do feel free to put questions in the chat as we go. If they are clarifying questions, Kaylee is going to help us answer those as we move through the presentation. If they are a little bit bigger picture, we'll save them until the end and try and have about 20 minutes for some Q&A. We do, of course, want to treat each other with respect and really make this a safe and comfortable space for everyone. So with the housekeeping out of the way, I am going to turn it over to Alex Hyde-Wright, who is the project manager for this work from Boulder County. Alex?
Thank you so much, Jennifer. As Jennifer said, my name is Alex Hyde-Wright, and I'm with Boulder County's Community Planning and Permitting Department, and I'm serving as the county's project manager for the Linking Boulder County project. I want to thank you for spending part of your evening with us. And now I'd like to call on the other members of the county's project team to introduce themselves, starting with Angel Bond.
Hello, I'm Angel Bond. I'm the Mobility for All program manager and member of this team.
And Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Kwiatkowski, Transit Program Manager, Boulder County, part of this team as well.
And Kia. Oh, you're muted, Kia.
Hi, I'm Kia with the county, also supporting this project.
Well, thank you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Boulder County Commissioner Claire Levy.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thanks to all the other Boulder County staff and our consultants, Nelson Nygaard, for organizing this and providing this opportunity for public input. So, as Alex said, I'm Commissioner Claire Levy, and I would like to welcome you to tonight's open house. And thank you for spending your evening discussing transit with us. As the name Linking Boulder County suggests, this project is all about improving connections with Boulder County and also to and from our neighboring counties, cities, and towns as well. So whether you ride transit to get to work, to school, for medical appointments, for shopping, special events, or the airport, we want to hear from you. We also want to hear what's currently working well and how could our transit service be improved to better meet your needs. And if you don't take transit currently, we want to hear what would need to change for transit to be relevant for you. Transit provides so many benefits to our community, both for society at large and for the individuals who ride it. Through this project, we'll set a vision for what we want the future of transit service in Boulder County to be and develop an action plan for how we can implement and achieve that vision. So thanks again for being here this evening, and I will now turn the presentation back over to Alex.
Thank you, Commissioner. And if we could go to the next slide. So as Jennifer said, we will be gathering feedback from you several times throughout the meeting using Mentimeter. And we're in just a second going to pull up our first Mentimeter questions. So there's a couple different ways that you can join Menti and participate. If you want to join on your phone, you can scan the QR code on your screen. If you want to join in a web browser, you can go to menti.com and type in the 8-digit access code at the top of the screen. Or we've also pasted a link in the chat. And then once we go to the polling, the access code will still be visible on the next slide.
Great. I will give people one more second to use the QR code before I pull that over. And as I do that, I also would love to take a quick moment and just acknowledge a couple other members of the consultant team who are here with us tonight. I referenced Kaylee with Fair and Peers, who is going to help manage the Q&A. Keep an eye on the chat for us. We're also joined by Paul Ludi, who is with Nelson Nygaard, and by Jason Miller, who's with Fair and Peers. So we've got good support here for everybody tonight. And let's go ahead and jump into our first few Mentimeter questions. Alex, I will let you kind of read this out to folks.
So our first question on the precipice of winter, seeking your feedback on whether or not you love snow. And we'll just use this as a test. And if anyone is having difficulty joining Menti, please let us know in the chat and we'll have somebody assist you. So it looks like
Great.
we're currently split between depends and yes.
With one person definitely not on board with snow. Before we move on, I just want to double check, is everybody able to access Menti and submit answers without any problem? I see some more bubbles coming in, so that's great. Great. So as we go through these slides, we did try and keep most of them multiple choice so that the answers will be hopefully quick and easy for you. You'll always have the opportunity to, oh gosh, we have a little bit of accidental annotation here. And Kaylee, I'm hoping that you can help us delete that so that we have a clean screen as we go. But as I was saying, we do try and use a lot of multiple choice. We will have some open-ended questions. And so just always be sure you're hitting submit as we get started. Alex, you ready to move to the next one?
Yep. All right. So if everyone could share a couple words about what brought you here this evening. What is your interest in this project? What are you hoping to learn from us tonight or throughout the project?
We have to believe you probably have other things you could have done on a Thursday night. So would love to know about what captivates you when it comes to transit. Give people a moment to share responses. Again, if anybody's having trouble with Mentimeter, please feel free to let us know in the chat, or you can just type your answers in the chat too. That is just fine.
Seeing a desire for better transit, accessibility for low-income families, want to be more involved in transit around Boulder, learning how the transportation plan affects my community, more service to Erie, service to Broncos games, service within, to, and from Boulder County, looking for more information, looking for what's ahead for public transit, looking for the future of Boulder County transit services, travel around the county without driving, long-term plans, transit to the non-mountainous parts of the county, believe in the power of transit. Looking for more information about this plan and a greener future. Less cars on the road. All right, This is great feedback, and I hope that we will be able to answer a lot of these questions as we move through the presentation.
Neat. All right, back to a multiple choice.
All right. So this next one, how often do you ride transit? Daily, weekly, monthly, rarely, or never?
I love it as we watch the race to see to see what's going to come to the top. Right. Looks like we have most people in at this point, Alex.
Okay.
So pretty pretty even, like kind of a little bit of a curve here. I think this matches a lot of what we've heard from people so far through the project. A couple of you ride daily. The majority of you are in the weekly to monthly category. Also, a couple people for whom transit maybe isn't a great choice on many days. All right, I think we've got that in. We've got two more getting to know you questions.
So this next question will just help us to know where you're from. So if you could share which community you live in.
So many choices here, and as you all are sharing this information with us, part of the reason that we ask questions about where people are joining us from, we'll ask one more demographic question in a moment, but we just want to make sure that as we move through the entire project, we are making opportunities to hear from people all across the county. And so we try and keep track of where people live and where they're participating from, so we can make sure we're getting to places that haven't yet been represented in our outreach. What are you seeing here, Alex? You want to interpret this one for us?
So far, a lot of folks from Boulder, Lafayette, followed by Longmont and Erie, and then even a couple from outside of Boulder County.
Great. All right. Well, we are so happy to have you all with us this evening. And last, before we jump into a little bit more presentation.
So last question, if you could share your age with us, your age range.
And again, our same purpose with this one, as I mentioned, is to make sure that we are reaching people from all across the county, from neighboring counties, all across the age range, and people that really represent Boulder County and everyone who lives, works, and plays here. Okay. I think we've got most people having chimed in again. Looks like, oh, that's fun. If I hover over, we can see our different age ranges. So we are fairly split. We don't have anybody on the younger end who is with us today, or maybe has not answered. And so that is an area of focus for us as we move forward. We want to make sure that we are reaching people who are both in their older years and people who are in their younger years, as well as everybody in between. All right, shall we jump back into the presentation? Let's hide this for a minute. Please do keep your phones or whatever devices you are using for Mentimeter, keep those out and open. We will certainly come back to this here in just a minute. So Alex, back over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So now we'll walk through a quick overview of the Linking Boulder County project. So first, we want to state that this project is not happening in a vacuum. There's been a lot of transit planning work done for different corridors and different communities throughout Boulder County. This includes everything from RTD's 119 bus rapid transit corridor, currently under construction, RTD's Northwest Rail peak service study, plans for new demand responsive transit services around the county. And Linking Boulder County is going to build on this prior work and determine what gaps remain in delivering a comprehensive transit system for Boulder County. So before we get too into the weeds, we want to make sure that we have a shared understanding of what we mean when we say transit. So generally, we're talking about services that are open to the public and use shared vehicles provided by a government or nonprofit agency. So this includes services that run on a set schedule and route, like RTD's Flatiron Flyer, the Skip, the LD, the 324. It also includes demand responsive services that pick you up and drop you off at your destination, like RTD's Flex Ride, Ride Free Lafayette, Ride Longmont, services that provide trips for people with disabilities like RTD's Access-A-Ride, and even shared micromobility options like B-Cycle and Lime scooters. So the whole transit system also includes the bus stops, park and rides, and the transit centers where you can access these different services. So now I think I'll turn it back over to Jennifer.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Okay, so we wanted to just set a little bit more context for you all tonight before we talk more about what the project includes and what we have started to learn so far. So Alex just talked through some of the services that are included when we think about transit in Boulder County. And what is on the screen right now is a map of all of the existing transit services. There are a couple of interesting things to note when it comes to transit in Boulder County. There are 12 different providers of services. And that is a great thing in some ways because you have a lot of involvement in who is providing transit service, but it can also be a little bit of a challenge because you have service coming from a lot of different organizations. Of the different services that are currently available, there are 49, so almost 50 different separate routes and services. 21 of those are open to ride without paying a fare, and 28 of them do require a fare. In addition to what we call fixed route services, which are the lines on a map and they run a typical pattern every single time, there are 5 on-demand zones plus another one coming in Erie. And what that provides is a different type of service where you are able to get a ride when you need it from one point to another point, not necessarily following the same route. And across all of these different services, there are more than 7 million annual boardings on routes serving Boulder County. So that is a lot of ridership on the routes that you have. As we move forward, we'll be talking a little bit about what that means. But if we think about all these transit services and what they mean for linking Boulder County, Commissioner Levy and Alex alluded to this a little bit earlier. And what we are trying to do through this project is really 2 key things. We want to bring all of those services together, the service that exists today and the service that you all need in the future, to really set a clear vision for what transit looks like in Boulder County, to ensure that we are being very open about where the county wants to go and how transit can help to meet your goals as a county. That big picture is important because it helps us know where we're trying to go. But a vision is only as good as your ability to actually implement it. People want to see improvements and not just ideas for improvements. And so the second key piece of the project is really establishing that plan to implement the recommendations. And that means that we need to think about funding. It means we need to think about who is going to provide services as we move forward. So those are the really important pieces of the project that we will make sure we are accomplishing over the next 14 or so months. And so this slide gives a quick overview of our schedule, what we are going to be doing when. I won't talk through all of the words, but the important things to note here are that we started with some early work this summer and are very much in the stage of exploring right now. We want to make sure that we understand what it is that you want to see. We are taking a look at data, we are talking to people around the county, and we are out riding buses, on bikes, driving, walking, rolling, making sure that we understand what it's like to move around the county today and what is needed in the future. We'll keep doing that work. We call it our existing conditions work through the end of this year and begin to set that vision for transit. As we move into the early part of 2026, we start bringing in the ideas for what we might do to improve transit. Sometimes when we talk about transit, it is only about the service. How often does the bus come? How long how many hours of the day does it operate? But through this project, we also want to think about capital projects. We want to think about the stops and stations. We want to think about priority for transit and the ways that we make sure transit works. And we want to think about some of the programs that support people riding transit. We want it to be as easy and seamless as possible for people to use transit whenever they need to or want to. And so that really becomes the second focus of our work. As we move out of the spring and into the summer and fall, that's when we turn our attention to the nuts and bolts of how it gets done. And we will talk about funding, not only current funding sources, but also what future funding might look like. We will dig into governance and who is going to be responsible, and then put that all together into a draft and final plan a little bit later in 2026. So that's what you can expect to see as you go on this journey with us over the next 14 months. One of the really important pieces of the project is hearing from the community. And we are doing that throughout the entire time that we are working on this project and using a lot of different tools to do that. We have 4 different advisory committees that are part of the project, 2 community advisory committees, one in Spanish and one in English. We also have a technical advisory committee and a policy committee that will help to shape the direction of this project. We want to hear from the general public as well, and we are doing that through both traditional and social media, website and mailers. We encourage you to follow our website. We will always have up-to-date information there. And then we want to use a lot of different tools, from one-on-one conversations, focus groups and interviews, to online surveys, paper surveys, and open houses, not only virtual, but sometimes in person. You'll also see us out and about in the community, popping up in different locations and really making sure that we are coming to you and not always expecting that you are coming to us. And some of the current outreach activities that we have underway include exactly these strategies. This is the one virtual open house that we are doing in this current phase of outreach, but we've been popping up around the county, including at some Halloween events and farmers markets. We've got a couple other things coming up. We're hosting some focus groups to really dig in with different communities about what it is that they want to see. And then we do have a survey that is available online right now that invites you to share a bit with us about what you see as the needs and opportunities. That survey will be open until November 20th, and we really hope that you will complete that as we go forward. We will share a link to that in a moment, but we're going to go back to Mentimeter here and get a little bit more feedback from you. So we have just very quickly run through what is included in this project. And what we'd love to hear from you as we pull this back up, we'd love to get your thoughts about a few different things. So Alex, let me turn it back over to you here.
All right, so for this next question, we're asking you, what are the biggest challenges facing Boulder County today? The options are affordability, climate resilience, traffic congestion, growth, transportation options, or other.
All right. Go
As
ahead, Alex.
responses come in, it looks like affordability, transportation options, and congestion are emerging as the top challenges.
Mhm. Yeah, when we think about the way that these challenges show up as we think about a transit plan, one of the things that we've started to hear from people is that affordability obviously presents a lot of different challenges for people, but especially when it comes to housing affordability and what we describe as often the mismatch between where there is housing that is affordable for people and where they are finding jobs. And that can mean that people are traveling a long way for work, and that can put new needs on our transit system as well. And traffic congestion and transportation options so often go hand in hand, don't they, Alex? People feel like, I don't want to be stuck in traffic. I need more options. And so seeing those two pop up together makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, let's jump to the next one then. I've lost my mouse. There we go.
So this next question will ask you, which parts of this project are most interesting to you? Is it the community outreach, the needs and opportunities, establishing a vision for transit, projects and programs, what new services might we recommend, or funding and governance? And for this question, just like the last one, we'll ask you to choose two.
Interesting. I would love, I don't want to ask you all to be doing too many things at one time, but for any of you that chose transit vision as something that is really interesting to you, it would be lovely to have you add in the chat what it is about the transit vision that is most interesting. We'll add a little bit of commentary to that as we go and make sure we're coming back to it. Alex, you want to share what else you're seeing here?
It looks like most interest in what that ultimate vision is going to look like, and then a three-way tie for second between needs and opportunities, what new services might be recommended, and funding and governance. How are we going to implement this?
Excellent. All right, great. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about the needs and opportunities tonight, of course, and then we'll hope that you all stay with us as we move through the project to learn a little bit more about those.
So one more question in this round. If linking Boulder County accomplishes just one thing, what do you think is most important for the county?
This has been a fun question for us as we have asked it really right from the beginning with so many of the conversations that we've had so far. And we know it's hard to narrow down to one thing, especially early in the project, but we've invited people to just be a little bit selfish at this moment. This is an opportunity to think about what this plan can do for you. We'll give you a moment to share some responses. Alex can read some of those. I see a couple of folks did respond with thoughts about why the transit vision was important to them. Really thinking about, someone is sharing that network effects for transit are really interesting and fun to think about, and also the philosophy of transit. Why do we make the choices that we do when it comes to transit? Somebody else shared that the vision is really what drives the decisions. We've got to have that vision set so that we know where we're going, and also really curious about how the vision might play in terms of thinking about what the future could hold. None of us have a crystal ball. And so how do we think about what that vision is and how might it be flexible as things change? Alex, what are you seeing in terms of what folks want linking Boulder County to do for them?
The faster and more frequent transit, enhancing ridership, a couple votes for enhancing ridership, equitable outcomes, increased funding, ease of use, to be able to have the freedom to travel anywhere around the county without needing a car. Future funding for sustaining and building fast and reliable transit. Using the RTD rail to put electric vehicles on the line between Boulder and Erie. Reliable and safe transportation, improve frequency, make transit more appealing, draw more support and more ridership.
Great. Okay, I think I will pull this away for a moment. This will still be open in your Mentimeter, and so if there's something else that comes to mind for you, please go ahead and add it. But we'll keep moving through the presentation here as well. All right, so transit needs and opportunities. Part of what we wanted to share with you tonight is a little bit about what we have learned so far. We are, of course, still in our early work, and hearing from you all is so very important, but we have been out and about, getting to know Boulder County, talking to a lot of people, seeing what our early survey results and early data analysis show. And so just wanted to highlight a few of those things for you. When we started the project in the middle of July, we spent some time really traveling all around the county. We did that, as I mentioned, on the bus. We did that by driving. We did that by biking and walking around, and got to visit many of the communities across the county. As we did that, we met with city staff, we met with agency staff in each of the communities, and we also had the opportunity to talk with some of the organizations that are really involved in transit. We're trying to make sure that we get a really broad and representative perspective as we go. And so that was an important first piece of the work that we did. Across all of those conversations and the work that we did as a team, we started to see some themes, and these are certainly not finished themes at this point, but wanted to just share with you a few things that kept coming up for people. We heard pretty consistently, and also experienced for ourselves, that frequency of transit, so how often the bus comes, and reliability, whether you can count on the bus showing up when it's supposed to, are challenges for people across the county. That is true regardless of the time of day we're talking about, and regardless of where we are thinking about. So that's an important piece for us to keep in mind. Another theme was that the transit, as I showed you earlier, there is a lot of transit service in Boulder County right now, but Boulder County is also really big. And the importance of serving destinations across the county is something that we cannot understate, but it does come at a cost. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money to serve a county that is this big and this diverse. And so that's an important piece to think about. Another key thing is the fact that when we think about how people travel today and how people use transit, it is different than it was 3 years ago, than it was 5 years ago, and certainly before that. COVID changed people's travel behavior across all modes and across all communities, and it really changed the way that we think about trips that are more than going to and from work. So one of the things that we heard consistently is that transit doesn't work as well for people who are trying to make trips other than that kind of typical commute time. And as part of that, thinking about the ways that you connect between all the different services is another opportunity that people raised. Again, when we think about the size of the county and we think about getting to and from a bus stop or a transit center, especially in the mountain communities, something that people pointed out is that we often talk about that first mile to get you to a transit stop or station. And in some of our more rural areas in the county, that's a lot more than 1 mile. That last mile can be 5 miles. And when we think about those distances that people travel, having safe, comfortable access, and then having really high quality amenities, whether that is a shelter, whether it is lighting or just a place to sit down, is an important part of making transit very usable and making it a good experience for people. Another theme that has come up, and this was part of a conversation that many of us were in earlier today, is the fact that with so many services and so many different service providers, it can be hard to understand the transit system and to understand where a route is going to go or how you pay for it. That is an important thing to keep in mind because getting people to use transit can be a challenge, especially if it feels hard to understand. That is especially important when people might not have access to a smartphone or when they might not be as comfortable getting on transit or using different types of services. And so thinking about the ways that we help people access the system is a key piece for us. We do want to recognize the benefits that transit can provide to the community as well as in talking to businesses and talking to the chambers. The idea that transit can be an economic development tool and really be an important part of the county's future came up over and over. And then people are realistic as we're talking about this. People know that everything takes money. There are demands on the county's resources well beyond transit and transportation. And so it is so important to think about regional coordination, the role that the Regional Transportation District, RTD, plays, as well as each of the communities across Boulder County. So those are a few things that came up in many of our conversations. And then we've also started doing some data analysis to supplement the work that we did in the field and the conversations with people, and wanted to just share a few quick snapshots with you tonight. So I talked a second ago about the fact that transit in Boulder County is really trying to serve a lot of areas right now. And some of that is because you've got so many amazing places to go across the county, whether that is thinking about where our schools are located, getting to the grocery store, getting to a medical appointment, or heading up to the mountains. There are a lot of places that transit is trying to serve, and this map just gives you kind of a quick snapshot of where some of those destinations are. So that is both an opportunity and a challenge for us as we move forward. Another thing that we've started to look at is what we call transit propensity. And what transit propensity does, this is an index that combines a few different factors. It looks at household income, it looks at vehicle ownership, it looks at race and ethnicity, and also country of origin. And we use different factors to really help us start to understand who is likely to use transit and where do they live. And so what this map is showing us, and this is just an early look, is the fact that when we combine these factors, we see some parts of the county that have a higher propensity or more likelihood to use transit. And those are shown in the darker color on this map. Some of what we see as true as we combine these factors is that, and this won't surprise you, households that don't have access to a vehicle, that's one of the strongest predictors of who is going to use transit. And that is people needing a mobility option, right? And transit is a great one. We do typically see in this data also that higher income households are less likely to use transit. That's not always true, but it can be sometimes. And so part of what we see as we look at this data is some of our more populated parts of the county do pop up a little bit more. And so we see some pockets of propensity for transit again in Longmont, in Boulder, in Lafayette, but really spread throughout the county. We also see the area around Nederland pop up. So this is a piece of what we look at as we move forward. We've also started to dig into where is transit ridership high today. And what this map is showing you are some of the areas of the county. It is showing you transit ridership across the county today, and it's looking at weekday transit ridership. You see different sizes of circles, and these are representing different stops or transit stations. The map tells you a story about where transit service exists today, of course. And so some of our strongest ridership we see in Boulder, where there is a lot of service. We see several of the corridors in Lafayette, in Louisville, and in Longmont start to pop up where you see more and more circles. And then we also see some strong ridership at the park and rides along US 36. And so those are the Flatiron Flyer, and some of the other buses that make important regional connections for us too. You'll see that as you look to the mountains, as you look at Netherlands and Eldora, those seasonal services, the Hesse and Eldo shuttles, also have a lot of ridership. And I think that's one of the really interesting things about looking at transit in Boulder County. It is not just, of course, commute, it's not just non-work trips, it's also about recreation. And that is an important piece as we think about seasonal trips as well. So another thing that we like to do is overlay those last two maps that I showed you. And part of what that does for us is it starts to point out where we might have some gaps. And what this map is showing us right now is that a lot of the ridership today does correspond to the areas of the county where we see higher propensity to use transit, but there are some gaps. And so this is one piece of the story. And where we go from here is that we continue with our analysis, including looking at current travel flows. And when I say travel flows, it's not just about where people are riding transit today, but it's also about where people are driving, where people are coming from and going to, so that we can really start to think about new and enhanced services in different ways. So again, that's just a quick peek at what we've looked at so far. I want to share one more set of data points with you, and then we've got a couple more questions to ask you. I mentioned that we have an online survey open. You can access that through our website, and I think Paul or Kaylee will drop a link in the chat for us as well. We have had this open since October 15th, so a few weeks at this point, and have already heard from nearly 600 people, which is great. Aside from a bunch of multiple choice questions, we do have a couple of mapping questions as well that ask people to tell us where you go on transit today and where you'd like to go in the future. And we've got about 1,300 different pins that are starting to show up on those maps. So please do take a look at those and think about what you'd like to add. Some of the themes that I have already mentioned, both in our data analysis and in our own observations, are being echoed in what we're hearing so far in the survey. People want more frequent service, transit that comes more often. They also are really expressing the importance of reliability, of comfort and convenience, and then feeling safe when they are waiting for the bus and when they are on the bus. And one of the things that we ask people is where they're going most often when they are taking transit, and the airport has come up so far as one of the top destinations. So those are a few things that we have learned so far, and we'd love to hear a little bit about some of these from you. So I'll pull our Mentimeter back over here, and we will jump to our next question. Alex, go ahead.
All right, so this next question, we're asking you, how well does public transit meet your travel needs? On a scale from very well to very poorly. And then as the answers come in, you can also see the distribution along this continuum here.
We're hovering just a little bit above, above the middle. It's great. This is really helpful feedback. It is, we've heard from some people so far in our conversations that, oh, there is a lot that is working well for me when it comes to transit. I just need more of it. I just want to see more of those good things. And then on the other side of things, we've shared some of the challenges with you already today, but it does look like we are seeing from more of you than not that that transit is helping to meet your needs pretty well. Alex, anything else that you take away from this?
I think we can go to the next question.
All righty.
All right, so this next question, we're asking you, which of these transit improvements are most needed? And like earlier, we're asking you to choose up to two. So new routes, more frequent service, earlier and later service, a service that starts earlier in the day and runs later at night, better stops and stations, better connections to transit, or other.
Alex, you want to explain better connections to transit in a little more detail?
Yeah, so we've heard throughout this round of outreach concerns about the walking and biking facilities, so things like sidewalks and multi-use paths and bike lanes that people can use to access bus stops. Not as much about park and rides. I think most of the feedback we've gotten is about walking and biking routes to get to transit.
I see a note in the chat as well that choosing only two is difficult. It's all of the above. We've got to start the prioritization process early on.
Frequency emerging as a top choice, and I think that echoes a lot of what we've heard in other venues throughout this first round of outreach. That buses that run more often is a top priority. And then coming in second, better connections to transit, so improved walking and biking facilities to get to and from bus stops, and then bus service that runs earlier in the day and later in the evening.
Great. And if the person who shared other wants to drop that in the chat, please do feel free. I see a question in the chat that I think speaks to this, Alex. And so Rob has asked, why isn't there anything here about the speed of a transit trip versus a car trip? And I think that is a really good question. So one of the things that plays into the speed of a transit trip and how it compares especially to a car trip is how frequent the service is. How long are you waiting? What's that additional time? But one of the pieces that we will look at through the project is thinking about how do we make transit a little bit faster? So if you're taking transit, but you're stuck in exactly the same traffic as somebody who's driving, it's not really much of a benefit for you. And so we do want to think about those ways that we can provide faster service and also make the trip as a whole faster. And Landon has noted the other is for reliability. So how much can I count on transit showing up when I need it to? And is that going to be the same from day to day so that I know I can get to daycare to pick my kids up before it closes? Okay, let's move on to our next question. Go ahead, Alex.
So this one you get to choose up to 3. So what's most important to you when it comes to transit in Boulder County? Our options are safety, comfort and convenience, accessibility, affordability, supporting businesses, access to jobs and services, equity, reducing air pollution, health and well-being, financial sustainability, reliability, or connectivity.
We'll give you a minute for this one. We know there are a lot of choices. We've talked about many of these words already today, but some maybe are a little bit different than what we've discussed so far.
So we have a couple emerging as the top choices this evening. Reliability first, followed by connectivity and affordability, and then reducing air pollution and safety. So it looks like that reliability is winning out. So having transit on time, having it go where you need to go, when you need to go.
Absolutely. It is really hard to plan your life when you don't know if you can count on something or not. Looks like connectivity really right up there as well. Okay. And Nick has noted in the chat that they see reliability and convenience as related to the question earlier about the speed of transit. Those two things together really do make a big difference when it comes to thinking about travel time and the total trip that you're making. All right. That is the end of our Mentimeter for now, Alex. So I will get this. Uh-oh. Now I've gotten us stuck for one moment. Excuse me. I never actually make it to the end of my Mentimeter slides because I always have too many questions in. That's a new thing for me. All right. Well, as we mentioned early on, we wanted to make sure that we have plenty of time to answer questions from you all this evening and didn't want to provide too much information while we're still in the early stages of our work. But we want to let you know what is coming next for the project, and then we'll move into some Q&A. So over our next 2 months, we are really focused on wrapping up our existing conditions and our understanding of needs and opportunities so that we can turn our attention to the future. And so what that will look like, I mentioned that this current phase of outreach goes through November 20th. And so again, we do hope to hear your feedback. We also are going to continue a lot of that data analysis that I showed you a few pieces of, and that includes really looking at where service is today, what service has changed over the last few years, where people are and are not riding transit, and then, as I mentioned, where are people traveling more broadly? And when we think about linking Boulder County, I know Alex mentioned this earlier, but I just want to reiterate it. When it comes to travel patterns, it is about more than just what's within the county boundaries. So many of the places that we all go span the boundaries of the county, really connect you to the region as a whole. And so we do want to look at the connections between cities within the county, outside of the county, and then also within each of the different communities here. So those travel patterns are really going to be an important part of what we do. We also want to make sure that we're learning from other communities across the country. Of course, no place is exactly like Boulder County, but there are communities that share similar characteristics. And so we want to understand if there are things that are happening there that we can bring into our work together. We will be pulling all of this together into a document that gives you an overview of what we found and then really starts to point us to the vision and the goals for linking Boulder County. And so as we move toward the end of the year and the early part of next, that is what you can expect to see. And so again, we do need your help to get there, and we hope that you will take advantage of a few different ways to get involved. The survey is, of course, now linked in our chat from tonight. You can also just find it by searching Boulder County Transit Needs, and it will pop right up for you. You can find us at a couple of different pop-ups. Our team will be at the Boulder Farmers Market this weekend and also in Longmont later this weekend as well. And then through our website, you can sign up for regular email updates and reach out anytime with questions. There are a lot of different ways to reach us, and we do want to hear from you as we move forward. So before we invite you all to share questions, the way that we will try and do this evening is to, I will stop sharing my screen. You are welcome to turn on your camera if you like, but you are also welcome to keep your video off to preserve bandwidth. We are going to try and use the chat for most of our questions, but if that isn't working for you or you feel like it's just not going to work to type it, you can use the raise hand function. And the way, again, that you find both of those, the chat will pop up if you hit the little speech bubbles that are at the bottom of your screen. And if you use the react button, that will pop up this adorable little collection of emojis, but will also give you the opportunity to raise your hand. And so please, again, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We'll ask Kaylee to let us know if there's anything that's come up so far that we haven't answered, and then we'll be happy to answer anything else that's on your minds. Alex, as we wrap up the presentation, anything else that you want to share before I stop sharing my screen?
I just wanted to reiterate our thanks for spending part of your evening with us, and happy to take any questions that you have at this time.
Great, thank you. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen and take a look back at some of what might be in the chat. Kaylee, was there anything that you were seeing as we were going that we didn't touch on yet?
Nope, didn't see any questions that you missed.
Okay. Do folks have questions for us at this point, either about something that we've talked about so far or not yet? Looks like Rob is typing furiously.
I have a question. Given that like a lot of transit service is provided for Boulder County is provided by RTD, what I guess power or funding does the county have to support transit within the county, and how much do we have to rely on RTD?
It's a great question. So we work closely with RTD. RTD will most likely remain the dominant transit provider in Boulder County. They're providing the vast majority of service, as you noted today. Boulder County does have funding for some additional transit services through our transportation sales tax, which was extended by the voters a couple years ago. There are also some new funding sources that the county could or is pursuing for transit service. One is a new fee on oil and gas development in the state of Colorado, and that the revenue from that fee is going to start being collected in 2026. And the state is going to distribute that to different transit agencies around the state with the primary purpose of supporting increased local transit service. So that is a new source of revenue. RTD also has a partnership program where they will support with funding services that are operated by local governments, and we have a couple different communities around Boulder County that have applied for that funding. So it's correct that we can't control what RTD does. We can work closely with them on services. And I think a big part of this project is really looking at understanding what are the services that RTD is going to continue providing, what capacity do they have for increased service, and beyond what RTD is able to provide, what's that gap between what RTD can provide and what our community really wants to see? And then how can Boulder County and the different local governments around Boulder County fill in that gap?
Alex, let me just add a little bit to that. Of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with what you said, and you're entirely correct about all of that. Colorado law does allow for the formation of something called a regional transportation authority. And that's a new taxing entity that voters would have to vote on to put in place to say, we've got a plan, here's a region, here's what we want to do, and here's what it will cost. This doesn't necessarily lead to that, so don't be worried that all of this is just so that we can go and ask the voters for more tax money. But I did want to just put that on the table. And then to what Alex was saying about the local service areas that are currently a part of RTD, this process would really allow us to go to RTD and say, look, here are some local services that we really want to fund in Boulder County, and these would meet important mobility services within Boulder County, and then make the argument to RTD to allocate more of their base funding for these kinds of services as they consider all the other competing needs within the massive geographic area.
Great. Thank you both so much. I know Rob has been working on a question for a minute here. Rob, if it's easier and you want to come off mute and just share your question, please go ahead.
Okay, I was trying to be considerate. I was just wondering if there's going to be any thought to some of the route patterns that add so much to trip time. I know what the reasons are for them. I live at the very South Boulder, and you probably saw in that map that the Table Mesa neighborhood doesn't get as much ridership, I think, as some other places. And part of that is because the skip makes this long one-way, and the 206 make these long one-way trips through slow neighborhood streets. I understand they need to do that to serve those communities, but I think there could be better configurations. There's another one on the dash. It goes through Via Appia, and if you want to get to Lafayette, say, you got to go sit on the bus through all of that when it could just go really quickly. And those are I think there's other places too where you look at the map and it's going through slow neighborhood streets and it's kind of circuitous and everything has to go to the downtown shelter. So you can't get places very quickly and you have to transfer a lot. When it's just there, it can take an hour or more to make a trip you could drive in 15 minutes. That seems like one of the biggest problems that we have, at least within the cities or, even between between cities. Like if I want to go to Longmont, it's so much longer, 2-3 times longer to take a bus. And then it doesn't get you very far when you can't, it doesn't go to many places. So it's not really an option. And I go to Longmont frequently, go to east of downtown Louisville a lot. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be any of that kind of thought about reconfiguring these things.
Thank you for that. It's a great question. Alex, you want to talk about that for a minute?
Rob, I think your question touches on a trade-off in transit planning where there's not necessarily a right answer. Those deviations in the neighborhoods that you're talking about, they bring transit closer to areas that otherwise would be farther away from the main arterials, but obviously that comes at the cost of reducing the speed of service on those primary arterials. And so as we gather input from communities and the public through this first round, I think that'll feed very naturally into our vision of what is more important for transit to accomplish, because it's difficult to both go deep into neighborhoods to provide a bus close to everyone and have transit be fast simultaneously. And there's not a right answer to that trade-off. It's what is more important for the community and what does the community want to see transit accomplish?
There are probably some, costs a little more, but like if you took the bound, if the skip say went right straight up and down Broadway without making the loop, but the bound came down and made that loop, then people could, you'd have both things happening, or the bound could make the loop in one direction and the skip could make it in the other direction. Things like that, or a more micro transit within Louisville to connect to the straight through route, stuff like that, I think, would get a lot more people making those trips because it wouldn't be that much slower than driving. I think there's a lot of cases where it wouldn't be that much of a compromise.
And we've certainly heard a lot from folks this fall about the need for transit to be travel time competitive with driving, and that a frequent reason cited for why I can't take the bus to fill in the blank destination is that it takes too long, as you've described.
I love it. Rob is ready to jump right to the solutions. I appreciate you starting to think about that. I do, just to add to what Alex shared and some of those trade-offs, that wrestling with trade-offs will be an important part of what we do as we start thinking about transit strategies. And also when we're thinking countywide, our ability to go very, very deep into every route is probably beyond what we can accomplish in the next year, but we want to make sure we're setting that framework of the connections and where we go next so that we at least are taking the first steps there. So thank you for that question. Anybody else have questions? No? Okay, Alex knows me now well enough to know that it is impossible for me to sit quietly for very long. I'm trying though. Any other questions?
Not a
Okay.
question, but I do see a comment in the chat with someone agreeing with Rob about the route deviations and feeling the same way about the Eldo shuttle and the travel time to the state park on the bus versus driving.
Thank you for that. 45 minutes versus 10 minutes is quite a trade-off to make. Okay. Well, again, we really appreciate you all taking some time out of your evening to join us and to share some of what's on your minds already. We do hope that you will take some time to complete the survey if you haven't already. Please do share that with your friends, with your neighbors, your colleagues, anybody that you feel like you really want to encourage to participate. And we will be sharing more information as we go. After this round of outreach, we do expect that our next round will be sharing what we have found and then really bringing people in to help shape some of those transit strategies that we've started talking about. So let me turn it back over to Alex and Commissioner Levy if there's anything else you want to add to just wrap us up for tonight.
Commissioner?
There we go. No, I just want to thank people for participating. Your input was really, really helpful, really important. And just hope that you continue to follow this process and remain involved.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for everyone for attending this evening.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.